Have you ever stood at a graveside, staring at the name etched in stone, and wondered what they would say to you if they could speak one last time? That cold silence between you and those who have passed on, it hides something profound, something that cuts to the very core of who you are. We walk through life accumulating possessions, building reputations, crafting personas that we present to the world. But those who have crossed the threshold of death see through it all. They see you with a clarity that perhaps even you don't possess. When we lose someone, we often feel not just the absence of their presence, but the absence of being truly seen. The dead carried with them the knowledge of who we really are, beyond the masks we wear. What would they tell you about yourself if the veil between worlds could be lifted for just one moment? What truths do they hold about your life that you've been too afraid to face? This isn't about communication with the dead in some mystical sense, but about a spiritual insight that Saint Ignatius of Loyola understood profoundly. The dead know what truly matters, and their silence invites us into a deeper truth about ourselves. Ignatius of Loyola was no stranger to confronting the reality of death. As a young Spanish nobleman and soldier, his life was forever altered when a cannonball shattered his leg during the Battle of Pamplona. During his long and painful recovery, he experienced what we might today call a near-death experience. Confined to his bed, with nothing but religious texts to read, Ignatius began to see beyond the superficial life he had been living. He saw how death strips away everything except what is most essential. From this profound realization came his spiritual exercises, and an entirely new way of understanding the human journey toward God. His insights cut through the noise and distraction of everyday life and pointed towards something eternal. The most transformative insight that emerged from Ignatius's convalescence was a fundamental shift in perspective. While recovering, he noticed something peculiar happening in his interior life. When he daydreamed about returning to court life, pursuing women, and gaining military glory, he initially felt excitement, but afterwards experienced a lingering emptiness. Yet when he contemplated the lives of the saints and imagined imitating their devotion to God, though it initially seemed daunting, he experienced a lasting peace and contentment afterward. This observation became the foundation of his teaching on the discernment of spirits. Ignatius realized that by paying attention to these interior movements, these consolations and desolations as he called them, one could discern the path toward authentic life. This experience led Ignatius to develop what he called the principle and foundation, the cornerstone of Ignatian spirituality. He wrote, "Man is created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save his soul. And the other things on the face of the earth are created for man, and that they may help him in prosecuting the end for which he is created. From this it follows that man is to use them as much as they help him on to his end, and ought to rid himself of them so far as they hinder him as to it." These words might sound simple, but they contain a revolutionary perspective that challenges everything our culture tells us about success and happiness. They remind us that we exist for a purpose beyond accumulation and achievement. But what does this have to do with what the dead know about us? Everything. Those who have passed beyond this life no longer view success through the lens of wealth, status, or achievement. They see with perfect clarity what truly matters. Consider this. If you could speak with loved ones who have died, do you think they would care about your job title, the car you drive, or how many followers you have on social media? Or would they see straight to your heart, to the love you've given or withheld, to the authenticity with which you've lived? The dead know that we often spend our lives chasing things that ultimately don't matter, while neglecting what makes life truly meaningful. When we stand at the threshold of death, whether our own or someone else's, the veil between the essential and the superfluous becomes transparent. Ignatius understood this profoundly and developed spiritual exercises to help people live with this awareness before death forces the realization upon them. He believed that by meditating on our own mortality, we could begin living with greater authenticity and purpose. This practice, sometimes called memento mori, remember you will die, wasn't meant to be morbid or depressing, but liberating. It cuts through our self-deception and calls us to live more truthfully. I want to pause here and connect with you more personally. Has there been a moment in your life when death, whether your own close call or the loss of someone you love, suddenly clarified what truly matters to you? That moment when all the things you thought were important suddenly seem trivial compared to love, connection, and spiritual truth? If you've experienced this clarity, this glimpse of what the dead already know, I invite you to share it in the comments with the words, "Death taught me." Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to gain perspective on their own life struggles. When we share these profound moments of clarity, we create a community of seekers, helping each other see beyond the veil of everyday distraction to what truly matters. Sometimes it takes just one honest reflection to illuminate the path for many others searching in the dark. Ignatius offers us a practical method for gaining this perspective without having to face tragedy. His spiritual exercises include a meditation known as the Meditation on the Two Standards. In this powerful contemplation, we are asked to imagine two armies gathered under two banners or standards. One is the army of Christ, representing truth, authenticity, and love. The other is the army of what Ignatius calls the enemy of human nature, representing deception, superficiality, and self-centeredness. Each army has a strategy for winning human hearts. The enemy entices with promises of wealth, honor, and pride, leading ultimately to spiritual destruction. Christ invites us to poverty of spirit, acceptance of difficulties, and humility, leading to spiritual freedom and fulfillment. This meditation isn't about good versus evil in simplistic terms. Rather, it's about seeing clearly the forces that influence our choices and understanding their consequences. The dead, free from the seductions of wealth and status, see clearly which standard leads to fulfillment and which to emptiness. They know when we've been deceived by promises of happiness through acquisition and achievement. They know when we've sacrificed authentic relationships for approval or advancement. And they know the peace that comes when we align ourselves with deeper values. There's a story told about Ignatius that illustrates this perspective perfectly. Once, while traveling with some companions, they encountered a wealthy merchant who was deeply unhappy despite his material success. After speaking with him, Ignatius asked, "If you were to die tonight, what would you wish you had done differently?" The question pierced the merchant's carefully constructed world. He realized that his pursuit of wealth had come at the expense of his family relationships, his spiritual life, and his own peace of mind. The question gave him the perspective of the dead, allowing him to see his life as it truly was, not as he pretended it to be. This question can be revolutionary for us as well. What would you change if you knew you would die tomorrow? What conversations would you have? What amends would you make? What love would you express? The answers reveal what the dead already know about you. They know your truest desires and deepest regrets. They know what you would rush to resolve if you knew your time was limited. And here's the truth that Ignatius would have us face. Your time is indeed limited, whether death comes tomorrow or decades from now. Another profound insight from Ignatian spirituality is the practice of the exam, a prayerful review of your day to discern the movements of God in your life. While there are several steps to this practice, at its core is the cultivation of awareness, noticing where you felt most alive, most authentic, most connected to your true self and to God, and where you felt diminished, false, or disconnected. The dead, with perfect clarity, could tell you exactly when you were living in alignment with your truest self, and when you were betraying it. The exam allows you to gain some of that clarity while you still have time to make changes. This practice isn't about harsh self-judgment, but about honest self-awareness. It's about noticing patterns in your life with compassion and a desire for growth. Ignatius believed that God's will for us isn't some arbitrary set of rules imposed from outside, but rather the path that leads to our deepest fulfillment and joy. By noticing when we feel that fulfillment and when we don't, we gain insight into the person we're truly meant to be. The dead know who you truly are, beneath the layers of persona and pretense. They know your capacity for love, for courage, for sacrifice. They also know your tendencies towards self-deception, avoidance, and fear. They see both your potential and your limitations with perfect clarity and complete acceptance. This is the gaze of love that we all crave, to be truly seen and accepted as we are. Ignatius believed that this is also how God sees us, with complete knowledge and complete love. The practice of the exam helps us experience that gaze in our daily lives. One of Ignatius's most profound insights was his understanding that spiritual growth isn't about escaping the world, but engaging with it more deeply and authentically. He coined the phrase, "finding God in all things," to express this perspective. Unlike some spiritual traditions that emphasize withdrawal from ordinary life, Ignatius saw everyday experience as the primary arena for encountering the divine. The dead know that life isn't divided into sacred and secular compartments. They see how God was present in the mundane moments you overlooked, how love was offered in ways you missed, how grace permeated even your struggles and failures. This perspective transforms how we view our daily lives. Suddenly, a conversation with a friend isn't just a social obligation, but a potential encounter with the divine. Work isn't just a way to earn money, but an opportunity to co-create with God. Even suffering can become a place of meaning and growth when viewed through this lens. The dead know that you missed countless sacred moments because you were distracted, hurried, or focused on the wrong things. They know the divine invitations you declined because you were too busy or afraid. Ignatius developed a prayer practice called contemplation to attain divine love that helps us see life with this awareness. In this prayer, we recall that love consists more in deeds than in words, and we contemplate how God loves us through concrete gifts. We consider how God dwells in all created things, giving them existence and working through them for our benefit. We reflect on how God labors and works for us in all things. And finally, we see how all good gifts descend from above, much as light rays come from the sun. This prayer cultivates the vision that the dead possess, seeing God's presence and action in everything. Another key insight from Ignatian spirituality is the concept of detachment or indifference. This doesn't mean not caring about anything, as the word might suggest in modern English. Rather, it means holding all things lightly, being attached primarily to God, and open to whatever best serves love. Ignatius wrote that we should not prefer health to sickness, wealth to poverty, honor to dishonor, a long life to a short one, but should desire and choose only what better leads us to the end for which we are created, the love and service of God. The dead know how many of our attachments were ultimately meaningless or even harmful. They know how often we clung to things, relationships, or identities that limited rather than expanded our capacity for love. They know the freedom that comes from letting go of what no longer serves our deepest purpose. Ignatian detachment isn't about renouncing the world, but about engaging with it from a place of freedom rather than compulsion or fear. This perspective allows us to hold life's gifts with gratitude without being possessed by them. We can enjoy success without needing it for our identity. We can love others without trying to control them. We can face loss without being destroyed by it. The dead know that true security comes not from accumulating or controlling, but from surrendering to the love that holds all things. One of the most challenging aspects of Ignatian spirituality is the invitation to find meaning in suffering. Ignatius himself was no stranger to physical and emotional pain. Beyond his war injury, he experienced severe illness, persecution, imprisonment, and the failure of many of his plans. Yet he found in these experiences not just endurance, but transformation. He saw suffering not as punishment but as participation in the redemptive work of Christ. The dead know the wisdom that can only be gained through suffering accepted with love. They know how your greatest struggles shaped you in ways that comfort never could. They know the compassion that was born in you through your own pain, the strength that emerged through weakness, the deeper faith that grew through doubt. They know that some of your greatest regrets may be not about the suffering you experienced, but about the ways you tried to avoid necessary pain, numbing yourself through addiction, distraction, or denial. Ignatius offers a perspective on suffering through his meditation on Christ's passion. He invites us to ask 3 questions. What have I done for Christ? What am I doing for Christ? What ought I to do for Christ? These questions transform suffering from meaningless pain to a participation in love's self-giving nature. They connect our personal struggles to a larger story of redemption and hope. Another profound insight from Ignatian spirituality is the importance of imagination in spiritual life. While many religious traditions emphasize doctrines or moral codes, Ignatius emphasized the transformative power of entering into sacred stories through imaginative prayer. In his contemplations on the life of Christ, he invites us to use all our senses, to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch the scenes we contemplate. This imaginative engagement isn't about fantasy, but about allowing deeper truths to transform us from the inside out. The dead know how often your imagination was captured by limiting or destructive narratives, stories of scarcity, fear, or isolation. They know how these narratives shaped your perception and actions. They also know the freedom that comes when imagination is captured by larger, more life-giving stories. Ignatius's approach to imagination invites us to enter into a different story, to see ourselves as part of a great drama of creation, fall, and redemption. He believed that by imaginatively engaging with the life of Christ, we could be gradually transformed to think, feel, and act more like Christ himself. The dead know that transformation happens not primarily through willpower or moral effort, but through what captures our imagination and affections. In our modern world, so many forces compete for our imaginative attention: advertising, entertainment, social media, news. Ignatius would invite us to be more intentional about what we allow to shape our interior world. The dead know how much of your mental and emotional energy was given to images and stories that diminished rather than expanded your soul. They know the person you might have become if your imagination had been more consistently engaged with beauty, truth, and goodness. One of the most distinctive elements of Ignatian spirituality is the concept of magis, which means the more, or the greater. It refers to doing what better leads to God's deepening life in us. It's not about doing more in terms of quantity, but about seeking the greater good, the more generous response, the more loving choice. The magis challenges us to move beyond mere obligations or minimums to ask what love calls for in each situation. The dead know when you settled for less than you were capable of giving. They know when fear held you back from the more generous response. They know when you chose comfort over growth, security over risk, the familiar over the new possibility that beckoned. They also know and celebrate the moments when you reached beyond what was required or expected and gave from the depths of your heart. This principle isn't about perfectionism or achievement, but about aligning ourselves more completely with love's expansive nature. It's about allowing God's generosity to flow through us more freely. The magis invites us to continually ask, not, "Is this good enough?" but "What would love do here?" The dead know that true fulfillment comes not from meeting obligations, but from these moments of generous self-giving. Closely related to the magis is the Ignatian understanding of consolation and desolation, the interior movements of the heart that indicate whether we're moving toward or away from God. Consolation isn't simply feeling good, but experiencing an increase in faith, hope, and love. It's characterized by peace, joy, and a sense of meaning and purpose. Desolation, conversely, is marked by a decrease in these spiritual energies, by confusion, doubt, fear, or apathy. The dead know the true sources of consolation in your life, not just what provided temporary pleasure, but what nourished your soul. They know what activities, relationships, and practices brought you into greater alignment with your authentic self and with God. They also know what led you into desolation, diminishing your capacity for love and cutting you off from your deeper source of life. This understanding offers a profound wisdom for decision-making. By paying attention to these interior movements, we gain insight into which choices lead toward greater life and love. The dead know how often you ignored these interior signals, choosing paths that you knew in your deeper wisdom would lead to emptiness. They know the countless small decisions that gradually formed your character, for better or worse. Perhaps one of Ignatius's most challenging and liberating insights is what he calls the three kinds of humility. The first is the basic humility of avoiding serious transgressions. The second is the freedom from attachment to wealth or poverty, honor or dishonor, a long life or a short one, a state of perfect equilibrium where we desire only what better serves God. But the third kind of humility goes further. It is the desire to be poor with Christ poor rather than rich, to be mocked with Christ mocked rather than honored, to be considered foolish for Christ rather than wise in the world's eyes. This isn't about self-hatred or masochism, but about such complete identification with Christ that we no longer need the world's approval or rewards. The dead know how much of your energy was expended seeking validation, building a reputation, avoiding rejection or criticism. They know how these concerns limited your freedom to love authentically. They know the peace that comes when identity is rooted not in achievement or approval, but in being loved by God. This third kind of humility liberates us from the tyranny of other people's opinions. It allows us to act with integrity, even when misunderstood. It enables us to stand with the marginalized without fearing guilt by association. It empowers us to speak truth to power without being paralyzed by potential consequences. The dead know the freedom you tasted in those rare moments when you acted solely from conviction rather than calculation of consequences. Another profound dimension of Ignatian spirituality is what has come to be called cura personalis, care for the whole person. Ignatius recognized that we are not just spiritual beings, but embodied creatures with physical, emotional, intellectual, and social dimensions. True spiritual growth integrates all these aspects rather than elevating one at the expense of others. The dead know the times you neglected your physical health in the name of productivity, or your emotional well-being in pursuit of achievement. They know when you sacrificed relationships on the altar of work, or ignored your spiritual life in the busyness of daily demands. They know the wholeness that emerges when all dimensions of life are honored and integrated. This principle has profound implications for how we care for ourselves and others. It challenges the compartmentalization that characterizes so much of modern life. The dead know the disconnection you felt when your work was separated from your deepest values, when your relationships were isolated from your spiritual life, when your mind was divorced from your heart. They know the peace that came in moments of integration when all parts of you were aligned in a single direction. Ignatius also offers profound insight into the process of transformation through his understanding of conversion. His own life was marked not by a single dramatic change, but by an ongoing process of conversion. After his initial awakening during convalescence, he experienced further conversions as he discovered the limitations of his initial understanding and opened himself to new insights. The dead know that transformation isn't a single event, but a lifelong journey of opening ever more fully to love. They know your moments of genuine change and growth, when you allowed yourself to be stretched beyond familiar limitations. They also know the times when you refused growth because it threatened your comfort or identity. They know both your courage in embracing change and your fear of losing what was familiar. Ignatian conversion involves a gradual reorientation of desires rather than merely a change in behavior. It's about falling in love with God in a way that orders all other loves properly. The dead know when your actions came from external pressure rather than internal transformation. They know when your good behavior masked an unchanged heart. They also know and celebrate the moments when love itself became your motivation, when giving became more satisfying than receiving, when service became freedom rather than obligation. If these reflections on Saint Ignatius's spiritual insights have touched something in your heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, where we explore together the path toward a deeper and more authentic faith. Each week we share teachings inspired by the lives of the saints to help transform our spiritual lives and draw closer to God. You are not alone in this search. Many of us are trying to live with greater awareness and intentionality in today's distracted world. Thank you for sharing this moment of reflection. Your presence here is already a sign of grace at work in your life. As we come to the end of our reflection, let's return to our initial question. What do the dead know about you that they can't say? They know the person you truly are beneath the roles and masks you wear. They know your capacity for love and your tendency toward fear. They know both your greatness and your smallness. They know the dreams you abandoned and the gifts you left unopened. They know the love you withheld and the forgiveness you denied. They know the times you betrayed your own values and the times you stood courageously for what matters. They know all this not with judgment, but with compassion, for they have walked the same human path. The wisdom of Ignatius invites us to live now with the perspective that death will eventually bring, to see our lives with radical honesty and profound compassion. His spiritual exercises offer practical methods for cultivating this awareness, from the daily exam to imaginative contemplation to discernment of spirits. These practices help us live more intentionally, more authentically, more lovingly, while we still have time to choose. Perhaps the most profound insight that the dead possess is that love alone endures. When all accomplishments fade, when all possessions are dispersed, when all praise and criticism are silenced, what remains is how we have loved. Ignatius understood this truth at the deepest level. His entire spirituality is oriented toward freeing us to love more generously, more authentically, more completely. The dead know that every act of genuine love, no matter how small, has eternal significance. They know that love transcends death itself. They know that in the end, we take with us only what we have given away. They know that the purpose of life is not achievement or acquisition, but transformation, the gradual expansion of our capacity to receive and give love. This is what Ignatius meant in his prayer of self-offering. The Suscipe, take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will, all that I have and possess. You have given all to me. To you, O Lord, I return it. All is yours. Dispose of it wholly according to your will. Give me your love and your grace, for this is sufficient for me. The dead know the truth of these words, that love and grace are indeed sufficient, that everything else is ultimately empty without them. So, what would the dead say to you if they could speak? Perhaps they would remind you that you are more loved than you can possibly imagine. Perhaps they would urge you to stop postponing joy, waiting for some future achievement or acquisition before allowing yourself to be happy. Perhaps they would encourage you to risk vulnerability, to speak the truths you've been afraid to voice, to offer the love you've been hesitant to give. Perhaps they would assure you that your struggles and suffering have meaning, even when that meaning isn't immediately apparent. Most of all, they might urge you to wake up, to become fully present to the life you're living now, with all its beauty and pain, its challenges and gifts. They know how easy it is to sleepwalk through life, missing the wonder and holiness of ordinary moments. They know how quickly time passes and how precious each day truly is. In the end, what the dead know about you is what Ignatius of Loyola tried to help us all recognize, that we are created for love, that our deepest fulfillment comes from aligning ourselves with this purpose, and that everything else, no matter how appealing or impressive, ultimately leaves us empty if it doesn't lead us toward greater love. They know that true freedom comes not from unlimited options, but from wholeheartedly choosing what truly matters. So today, right now, what will you choose? How will you live this one precious day you've been given? What love will you offer? What truth will you speak? What beauty will you create? What forgiveness will you extend? The dead already know what you'll decide, but you still have the chance to choose. If you found value in this reflection, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your engagement helps us share these spiritual insights with others who might benefit from them. Thank you for your presence and attention. May you live today and every day with the clarity that comes from seeing your life through the eyes of eternity, with the perspective that the dead already possess about what truly matters.